Alright. Yeah, we're gonna do some reading. Hello. Yes, good morning. Actually, the sky looks really nice. Hold on, just 1 second. Yes, hello, good morning. I'm good, thanks. How are you? I was counting the squirrels. 1, 2, 3. One up in the tree, 2 on the ground, and a bluebird in the puddle. I'm good, thanks. How are you? Yeah, it's a really beautiful morning. Yeah, I know. Hold on. Shut that off. Yeah, I was just switching off the lights. It's beautiful. Beautiful morning sky. Yes. Yeah, it looks quite massive, doesn't it? Well, in comparison, just, yeah, in general, for any kind of event, so to speak. I don't even know what it's for, do you? Yeah, a few different people asked if they were having a parade. All right, we're reading Columbia University's course in literature. Book number, let's see, book. Okay, we're going to do that one again? Oh yeah, because we really didn't finish it, did we? Alright. It got requested to do that one again? Alright, so we're doing the Writers of Modern America and the German Mind in the Columbia University course in literature. We're doing a fresh start again. I guess turned into again. Anyways, all right. The German Mind. Yes. Alexa, Volume 1. Yeah, and as you can see, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Painting by Stryler. Once again. Styler or Stryler? I don't know. Let me know. This copy was in 1928 by Columbia University Press. Here we go with the introduction. Literature, even lyric poetry, in its essence, a social art. Hold on, I'm going to restart that. Literature, even lyric poetry, is in its essence a social art and develops through the interchange of ideas. Alexa, Volume 3. No poet or thinker can do without these impulses from without, unless he is to become as unfruitful as the bud without the fertilizing pollen. Nor can any national literature do without them. It's a really powerful first couple sentences. I'll reread them. Alexa, Volume 4. Seems like a big jump from 3 to 4. All right. Literature, even lyric poetry, is in its essence a social art and develops through the interchange of ideas. No poet or thinker can do without these impulses from without, unless he is to become as unfruitful as the bud without the fertilizing pollen. Nor can any national literature do without them. Some periods in European history have been especially rich in such interchanges. For example, the post-Hellenic period, the Crusades, and the Renaissance, while in others the literature of the European nations have been less hospitable to impulses from without. In these interchanges, Germany has always played an active part, due in some measure to its geographical position and also to the ancient tendency of the Germanic peoples, observable since the earliest migrations to seek the exotic and foreign. Thus, the development of German literature has been marked from its beginning by a series of impulses from abroad. France gave it the alphabet and the religious symbols for its earliest efforts. France, at the time of the Crusades, delivered the patterns of chivalry, which inspired the alphabet and the religious symbols for its earliest efforts. France, at the time of the Crusades, delivered the patterns of chivalry, which inspired the courtly epics of Wolfram von Eschenbach and Hartmut von Ewe, and the lyrics of the Minnesingers. Italy and Spain supplied the models for the Baroque lyrics and novels of the 17th century. And England's Milton and Addison awakened a new life in the stilted forms of the following age. Shakespeare and the sentimental British authors of the 18th century were the stars which guided the young revolutionists who opened Germany's classical period, and finally the Scandinavians Ibsen and Strindberg. The Frenchman Zola and the Russian Tolstoy stood behind the cradle of the naturalistic movement at the end of the 19th century. Thus, German ears have always been open to the voices of foreign poets and philosophers, and not a few writers like Macpherson, Ossian, Poe, Whitman, Oscar Wilde, and even Shakespeare have found greater fame in Germany than among their own countrymen. This eager interest in foreign letters, which self-critical Germans often deplore, in reality a very great source of strength for the literature of their fatherland. It betokens no lack of originality, rather a great intellectual curiosity, a keen quest for ideas that has enriched Germany with innumerable works stimulated by a foreign content and style. As far apart has Grimmelshausen's Simplicismus, inspired by the realistic cleverness of the Spanish Picaro and Goethe's West Eastern Divan, an excursion into the Epicurean world of the Persian poet Hafiz. Wherever the German has found his material, he has marked it quite clearly with two characteristics: a tendency to search for universal, basic ideas, and an endeavor to establish ethical relationships. Alexa, Volume 3. Even his lyric poetry shows a fundamentally, is saying that right? fundamentally, okay, thank you. I thought it sounded weird. Even in his lyric poetry, shows a fundamentally reflective element. And it cannot be forgotten that ever since the novel first appeared in modern dress, the German ideal for this genre has been the Bildungsroman, the novel which traces the inner development of character. Alexa, Volume 1, Development of Character, in its battle with life's realities and illusions. A poet has essentially lyric in his nature. As Heine racks his tortured soul amid the very agony of misprized love in the search for an explanation that will fit the whole riddle of human unhappiness, and singers of the external beauties of nature, like Holderlin, Annette von Drost, and Lenau, never cease to puzzle over a Weltanschauung. It is this tendency toward the abstract and universal that explains the incurable idealism of a German poet and philosopher. It is only rarely that he is genuinely realistic or satisfied to dwell in a world of mere beauty. Alexa, Volume 3. This clouds look really awesome, huh? By nature a Platonist, he builds up within his soul a system of ideas and forges these into a unity which becomes for him a reality, to which he holds henceforth with the tenacity and zeal of a religious fanatic. Thus Wolfram, in his Parsifal, erects a sublime ideal of Christian chivalry. Thus Hans Sachs creates ideals of contemporary types, the roving scholar, the burgher craftsman, the quarrelsome wife, and other figures of Nuremberg's streets and marketplace. Thus Lessing builds his own ideal of classical antiquity, based on Winckelmann's pattern, which was already a poetic idealization of the culture of the ancients. Thus Arnhem and Folk idealized the Middle Ages, and Grillparzer the Austrian Habsburgs. In creating his ideals, the German poet never quite forgets ethical values. No people was ever less satisfied with the theses, art for art's sake. Every great German, you gonna put that on the board? That's a good one to put on the board. Art for art's sake. For Pete's sake. Every great German writer, even in periods of the crudest naturalism, like the last decade of the 19th century, has always felt an irrestrainable urge to build a bridge that will lead from the beautiful to the good, as Schiller did on a so sublime a scale. For that reason, Germany has produced so many stirring tragedies and so few good comedies, not as Madame de Stael says, because the tragedy is the field on which ethical problems can best be unfolded. Every great German poet, Goethe once remarked, is also a great teacher. The beginning of literature in Germany came with the early Carolingians, Carolingians. I wanted to get that right. The beginning of literature in Germany came with the early Carolingians. And flowed out of the necessity for consolidating the missionary conquest, which had begun It was. Alright, the beginning of literature in Germany came with the early Carolingians. Man, I'm going to do it again. The beginning of literature in Germany came with the early Carolingians and Ooh, feel that nice cool breeze. The beginning of literature in Germany came with the early Carolingians and flowed out of the necessity for consolidating the missionary conquest which had begun under their Moravian predecessors. Moravian predecessors. Charlemagne, with his militant missionary zeal, gave a strong impetus to the use of German for religious formulas, and the 9th century saw a brief period of flowering when the great monasteries of southern and central Germany produced translations and paraphrases from sacred and ecclesiastical writings, and original poems glowing with religious fervor. Like the whole culture of the Carolingian period, these were monastic, learned, and aristocratic in character. When the dynasty of Charlemagne had been succeeded by the Saxon Otis, and the missionary zeal of the great monasteries and the bishoprics had given place to the cultivation of political and economic power, a new renaissance of Latin culture set in and crowded German poetry out of monastic library and cell. For a century and a half, monk and wandering scholars sang ancient German legends and modern roadside adventures in the language and manner of Virgil or Ovid, or set in Christian heroes and heroines into Latin plays, like those which the learned Apses, Roswitha, and Grandersham wrote under the influences of Terence. A new birth of German literature grew out of the monastic reforms which preceded the Crusades. Unlike the earlier period, the 11th century created a literature which was democratic in character. Warnings of the wrath to come, paraphrases of the Old and New Testament, hymns to the Virgin, all in crudely rhymed couplets without regard to regularity of accent, but charged with a profound and vigorous religiosity. The Crusades brought a rapid development. Saints, legends embellished with wondrous adventures, led the way to profane themes which were borrowed from classical sources or imported from France. By the middle of the 12th century, the clergy had ceased to be the leading interpreters of national ideals. The minstrel had found his way to the court of lord and bishop and sang of ancient heroes like King Rother, a Lombard chieftain of the age of the migrations, or Duke Ernest, a popular German figure of a younger age, who were now sent to seek brides in the eastern Mediterranean among wonders culled from their pages of Herodotus, and Pliny, and decorated by weird tales told by returning crusaders. These minstrel epics were the overture for the great symphony of literary production, which marked the last decade of the 12th and the first half of the 13th century throughout southern and central Germany. The knights were its authors. Its theme was chivalry, whether in the courtly epics of King Arthur's paladins, or of passionate lovers like Tristan, or seekers for a mystical ideal like Parsifal, or in the love songs of the Minnesingers. The themes were borrowed from classical antiquity and from France. The lyrical forms were provincial in origin, but the German knight recreated all in his own fashion. The heroes of chivalry and the works of Wolfram and his great contemporaries are not brilliant knights errant in search of adventure, like their French prototypes in the poems of Crétin de Troyes, but are marked by a reflective and mystical quality that has come down to succeeding generations, and such types of Christian knighthood as the seeker for the Holy Grail in Wolfram's Parsifal. Alexa, Volume 1. Parsifal, and the Penitent Leper, and Hartmann's Poor Henry. The lyrics of Walther von Vogelweide display a profound joy in nature's moods and a simple directness in love songs addressed to maids of low degree that shake off the stilted and artificial trappings of troubadour inheritance. The creative impulse which had seized German knighthood did not exhaust itself with themes from abroad. It also brought to the surface legends of early Germanic heroes which had been cultivated beneath the threshold of literature for more than 6 centuries. Mythical characters like Siegfried, historical personalities like Theodoric, the Gothic conqueror of Italy, or the ill-fated chieftains of the Burgundian kingdom on the Upper Rhine, which fell under the attacks of the Huns in the 5th century, became now the heroes of epics of chivalry. The Song of the Nibelungen, the Epic of Gudrun, and the poems of Dietrich Saga are the courtly forms of ancient legends which had lived among the peoples of Germany since the migrations. Owing to the destructive zeal of a fantastic clergy in the earlier stages, and ballad and crude epic poem are entirely lost. All that is left of them are rugged forms, like that of the wild Hagen in the Song of the Nibelungen, who slakes his thirst on the blood of fallen enemies in the corpse-strewn hall of Attila's castle. With the passing of the Crusades, the great era of medieval German literature passed also. The energy of German knighthood now found its outlet in carrying the sword and the cross to the Slavic peoples across the Vistula and the Memel, along the eastern coast and the Baltic, and into the forest of Lithuania. German settlers from the lower Rhine and Holland followed, and planted farmsteads and built cities along the rivers and on the coast. By the year 1400, there lay between the Baltic and the Alps 2,000 German cities, pulsing with a vigorous commercial and social life. Gradually, the old forms of the literature of chivalry changed to accord with this new environment. Epic tales of courtly or popular origin were spun out to include a whole cycle or family of heroes, and were retold in prose romances of unending length. The city burghers, who were the new authors in the audience for literature, showed an insatiable appetite for the didactic forms, and found heroes like the Till Eulenspiegel, or in coarsely satirical tales of peasant life. Sebastian Brandt, a Strasbourg lawyer, met exactly the taste of his contemporary burghers at the end of the 15th century by mustering into his ship of fools all the weaknesses of the age in cap and bells and garb of motley. The minne song gave way to the master song, stilted compositions of handy craftsmen who cultivated the lyric art according to the rules, as complex and rigid as those which governed the working men's guilds. The old refinement of verse was gone. In its place, burgher and monk counted the syllables on their fingers and wrote a rough and ready doggerel that was vigorous but altogether inartistic. New forms arose to correspond to the ideals of an increasingly social age, the folk song, which by the beginning of the 16th century had become a vehicle for the whole emotional life of the lower classes, and the religious drama, which about the same epoch completed the development from the simple Christmas and Easter plays into the great cyclical dramas containing the whole plan of salvation, of which the present Abermagau Aberamagu. Yeah. Aberamagu. The present. Of which the present Aberamagu Passion Play is a direct, though much abbreviated, descendant. Slowly, humanistic influences filtered through the Alpine passes and across the border from Holland, their coming heralded by translations of the classical authors and the Italian storytellers. Already in the 14th century, the Protestant Reformation had sent forerunners in the mystical fathers, Eckhart and Toller, who sought God on the direct path of rapt contemplation and pictured in eloquent prose the love life of the soul. With Luther, all German literature became for a time theological and polemical, and in dramas, satires, and master songs, religious opponents continued to pillory and ridicule each other until late in the century. Although often coarse in word and picture, the literature of the early 16th century, like Luther's stirring tractates and martial hymns, and the powerful satires of the Strasbourg Franciscan, Thomas Murner has a genuinely national and popular tone, such as it does not show again in Germany until the Napoleonic Wars. The invention of printing had made possible numerous chapbooks, like those about such popular heroes as Dr. Faust and Till Eulenspiegel, and collections of humorous and grotesque stories multiplied in verse and prose. Many of the tendencies of the day united the Hans Sachs, the cobbler poet of Nuremberg, who absorbed the popularized humanism current in the busy South German metropolis, and put into rough but virile verse stories of classical origin, old German heroic legends, folk tales, and quaint fancies of his own, in master song or rhyming tale, or in Shrovetide dramas. Hans Sachs most nearly united the learned and popular streams of German literature as nearly perhaps was possible in a country of many capital cities and in a time of distracting religious conflict. After him, the streams flowed on side by side until the frightful destruction wrought on city and rural population by the 30 Years' War quite took away all voice and expression from popular poetry. Henceforth, for a century and a half, German literature dwelt in the libraries and cabinets of the learned. It was a period of schooling in the stylistic forms which had been developed in Italy and France as a result of the Renaissance. In the libraries and cabinets of the learned. Yeah, I mean, it was quite common in different communities that certain teachings weren't required for some who were going to be, like maybe doing more labor work. Back in those days, kids were working on the farm by age 5 or 6, Yeah, and this was even earlier than that. Yeah, that was just a way of life back then. You don't even have to say farm, just doing the day's chores, collecting dirt to eat, maggots, churning the butter, something. Right, and then some weren't going to be brought up that way. Yeah, that's just the way it was. Well, of course, that those that were more well-to-do, and that's the age-old, you see all these different stories throughout history of those who want to do work with the commoners, and want equality, right? What happens? Right, they go to try to help them, but then all the others are like, what are you thinking? You don't have enough for them all to live like us. So if you go over there, you're not going to have the supplies you think you have to help them. I mean, you'll be one of them. You'll be working with them. You'll feel better. Eventually they're going to turn on you. It'll be like, you're one of them. Yeah, I know, but now they disowned me. I can't go get gold or food. Well, then we're going to eat you. We'll teach them a lesson. Well, obviously they don't care. Go ahead, eat me, bitches. You hear all these stories all throughout history like that. So I think the point is, they don't get, it's not about to get them to live like you. We don't have enough for them to all be spoiled and live beyond their means like us. Most people are just happy. Like, some people are so grateful for a trailer and a job at Walmart. Like, they work for that, and they are grateful if they are able to have a working vehicle that's insured, that gets them back and forth to work. They are grateful for that. Right, there are so many people that just are in a world where they try to avoid even going to those places, let alone having to... Right, I mean, it's not even a thought in their minds. Look at what they do. They spend more on a pair of shoes than you make in a year. Right, so think about that. I know, it's just to balance things out somehow. You gotta earn it. We worked for this money. I know, we're not saying take anybody's money. I know, it's really just middle class people fucking over
the retards and poor people, because they're the ones with access to those systems with which none of you even work in. I know, you like to try to find people who do work within those systems that you can use in whatever community you're trying to fuck over. You fucking slugs. That's incredible, isn't it? Anyways, yeah, age-old tale, huh? Anyways, the sweeping metrical reforms initiated by Martin Opez in the early years of the Great Religious War finally banished the sturdy doggerel of the preceding age and made use of the critical theories of Martin Scaliger and Pierre Ronsard to train German poets in the refinements of Renaissance prosody and diction. The popular strain is heard only in the hymns with which Paul Gerard and a host of other devout souls enriched in so remarkable a fashion the anthologies of every shade of religious faith through the 17th century. In the main, however, German literature in the age of Baroque is far from devoid of strength and vigor, although these are often lost in the search for the novel and bizarre in figure and diction. Hold on, I'm taking a sip of my Celsius lemonade and I got a lemon seed in my mouth. I've already eaten a couple. I don't want to eat those. Okay. See, bizarre in figure and diction. Literature and life seldom joined hands. Alexa, Volume 3. The plays of the learned and gifted Griffius could not find their way to a stage which was devoted to blood and thunder, melodramas, or degenerate translations from English and French playwrights. Blood and thunder melodramas. The novel showed itself in the most vigorous product of time. With the help of Spanish and French models, it began to free itself from satirical elements and to fall into the true epic stride, which is apparent even under the fantastic and overladen plots of the vast four-deckers of the end of the century. Under the realistic hand of the Baden magistrate, Grimmelshausen's the autobiographical novel united the learned and popular streams of German literary tradition and rises in simplicissimus to a significance in the history of the European novel, unchallenged between Cervantes and Richardson. The first half of the 18th century saw a clarification of German style from two directions: a campaign through a critical press in the style of Addison's Spectator for a refinement of taste based on a sound moral philosophy, and a rise of interest in classical studies. In these new models, the poets of Germany saw a new life springing up, and in imitation they too saw a style in which simplicity and good sense should take the place of Baroque fancies and wild exaggerations. A powerful force in the battle for good taste was waged by the hundreds of moral weeklies, which sprang up first in Hamburg and later in Leipzig and Zurich and other German cities. Leadership in the movement fell to the Leipzig professor of poetry Gottsched, who, for the forms of verse and for comedy and tragedy, codified the rules for rhetorical figures, for the forms of verse and for comedy and tragedy, and thereby established the norms based on common sense, which were so dear to the Age of Enlightenment. The effects of the critical campaign for reform were immediately apparent in the work of Berlin and Leipzig poets, who, about the middle of the century, in light and polished verse, gave voice to the pedagogical ideas of rationalistic age in lyrical and satirical poems and in fables. In the meantime, the spirit of the classical poets Anacreon and Horace was revived in graceful songs of love and wine, like those in which the friendly canon Glemm chants the praises of Amor and Bacchus. A powerful current had, however, already come to the surface, which was to give more noble content to German poetry than songs of stolen kisses or sprightly fables. The young Leipzig student Klopstock burst all the bonds of tradition when in 1748 he issued the first 3 cantos of his Messiah and the hexameters of Homer, marked by a rhapsodical strain of sublime pathos which proclaimed a new freedom for the emotions. With Klopstock, German literature marks its full assimilation of the spirit of the Renaissance. Henceforth, for 2 generations, classical patterns of thought and style were never far absent from Germany's great poets. Classical ideals in art and in the tragedy inspired Lessing to break with French rules and seek the noble simplicity and silent grandeur of the Greeks. The standards for his critical essays and tragedies, and it was chiefly from classical writers that he developed the noble conception of humanity, the finest flower of the Age of Enlightenment, which appears in his moral essays and in Nathan the Wise. His contemporary Wieland presents the spirit of enlightenment from another side of his epics and novels, seeking to portray virtue in its pleasing aspects, and marking in graceful and mellifluous verse the final conquest over the spirit of the Baroque. Rationalism had won the day, but ere it could consolidate its position, it was confronted by a new revolution in which the ever-present irrational elements in the human soul were to dispute its authority. This began in East Prussia, in Königsberg, where Kant was already beginning to set limits to human reason. It opened with a demand that the primitive, the original genius within man, be permitted to express itself according to its own laws of being, a demand which was translated into formulas of literary criticism by Herder and brought by him to West Germany. Here the new gospel was seized by the young student Goethe, who proclaimed the right of the individual to feel and act in accord with his own genius in his first great drama, Gott von Berlichingen, with the Iron Hand, and his first great novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. Yeah, so I was just reading someone's comment. They said, that's a great example there. They were talking about the right of an individual to act in accord with its own genius. So, right, so many examples here with similar statements or phrases or examples. So someone says, okay, so I want to sing my heart out. Go ahead. Sing your heart out. That's great. Something just made me want to laugh. It came off as funny to me, so I really want to laugh. Go ahead. Laugh your ass off. That's great. Now we are in a courtroom. You have to be quiet. There's a hearing going on. You might even be the lawyer. Something just came off to you as funny. Now, we want you to act within your own genius, but in certain circumstances, the thing, I mean, it wants to stand true to its ground and act within its, but it's not just going to burst out. It's going to laugh to itself, right? I mean, unless the judge is making a joke and everyone else is laughing, then okay, good to laugh out loud, right? You know what I'm saying? Right, I mean, it just wants to strip naked. I just feel like I want to act within my own genius and stay true to myself and my ground, but you should also want to act within reason in public spaces and not get fired or get arrested, right? Right, and there are to start going, hey, this is America, this is freedom, you're not going to take my sovereign rights, and just start stripping naked in a courtroom. It's stupid. Or burst out laughing. I mean, you might be the kind of guy that laughs at a funeral. You can't understand what I mean. Well, you soon will. Right, that might happen. There might be a time when that happens. Hopefully, though, there's something within you that knows, even if it accidentally, it just, oh my gosh, and you can maybe remove yourself, or maybe everyone starts laughing along, like, oh man, we really needed that, and you're shocked and surprised, like, oh phew, I thought I was going to get yelled at. Glad this is a good crowd. Right, I mean, seriously, you should want to, or if you know better, like, oh man. And then try to tone it down, or are you going to be like, you know what, the heck with it, these are my sovereign rights, and then just get even louder? Right, I mean, it's good to have boundaries or understand these kind of boundaries. I mean, to start to say religion or law, Alexa Volume 1, or anything like that is just, yeah, you get what we're saying. Great example. I'm glad you brought that up. I hope I didn't twist it into too much of a... That's exactly what you meant? Oh, great. I thought so. All right. Let's see. Brought by him to Western Germany. Here, the new gospel was seized by the young student Goethe, who proclaimed the right to the individual to feel and act in accord with his own genius. And his first great drama, Gotz von Berlichingen, with the Iron Hand, and his first great novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. The stormy demand for... Right, so a child doesn't know, right? So it's up to the parent or guardian, as opposed to, oh, isn't it cute? It's a kid, it doesn't know any better, so we can all laugh and, oh, it's fun. No, you should know as a parent to know better and take them away, and then don't yell at the child and punish the child because you had to leave an event. Right? Laugh it off. Go somewhere. I'll be like, oh, well, I guess we have to leave here. We're going to Chuck E. Cheese. Right. Whatever it is. And the kid doesn't know. And you could say things like, oh, we were too loud for that place. Maybe next time. You know? Right? Or you can punish the child and say, you know, because you were loud, we had to leave. And no, we're definitely not going to Chuck E. Cheese. I don't care if you see that big yellow arch and you cry for those french fries. We're fucking going home. You're going into your crib. I'm going to give you some Benadryl. You're going to sleep and Mama's going to drink and have her fun. Fucking little brat ruined my life. Right, I mean, there are, you know, different kind of circumstances. You see it all, huh? Anyways. Right. The right of the individual to feel and act in its accord with his own genius. In his first great drama, Gotz von Berlichingen with the Iron Hand, and his first great novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. What would I do? Well, I don't know if I'd go to Chunky E. Cheese. We don't have a Chunky E. Cheese here. Option B, definitely not. No. McDonald's, I mean, maybe. Maybe. There's a few things there I can have. I mean, and I'm sure there'd be other options too. Bakeries, parks to run around in, indoor, outdoor. You got a YMCA in the area? Something. Go home, turn the sprinkler on. I don't know. What do you got? Right. The stormy demand for a new realism in literature, the insistence on the right of the individual to set his own standards in life, inspired a host of dramas and lyrics, including the early dramas of Schiller. Gradually, however, a deepening enthusiasm for classical models and for the perishable forms of beauty which are to be found in Goethe's Iphigenia, 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 Goethe's Iphigenia, and his mature lyrics in Schiller's great series of historical dramas. Concurrently with this development of German classic literature came the classic Gotten, a spirit on which was to put an end to its creator. Kant marked off the limits within which pure reason may operate, and flashed a light of hypotheses upon what lay beyond its ken. His younger contemporaries, Fichte and Schelling, pushed like bold explorers farther into the nominal world and found an explanation of the riddle of the universe. The former in the all-creative activity of the ego, the latter in the identity of matter and spirit. At this juncture, a group of young writers made its appearance. The early Romantic school fired with the same enthusiasm for the irrational, which Goethe had experienced a quarter of a century earlier, and sharing his enthusiasm for Greek ideals, but hard bitten by philosophy and eager to establish a synthesis of art and life, which should satisfy alike metaphysical definitions and mystical impulses. They sought, like Ludwig Tieck, the harmony of spirit and nature in the religious mysticism of the Middle Ages, and the art enthusiasms of the Renaissance. They glorified, like novelists, the mysterious powers of the night and the seductions of death in lyrics of exquisite beauty, and in the glittering prose of their Märchen transformed the real world into a magic world of dreams. Yeah, I just like to look away out at the sky for a minute every once in a while. Yeah, my eyes, if you notice, I almost noticed too the same time my lisp and certain muscles in my tongue and stuff start to get tired. It's about the same time my eyes start to strain a little bit. Yeah, just looking away at a distance or stuff like that can help. Yeah, even if you can't look outside, just looking at a distance. Yeah, what about those mirrors? You know those mirrors when you look into them? Yeah, it'll almost look like it goes on for quite a while. Yeah, like those kind of ones, exactly. Now, does that kind of have the same effect? Yeah, probably can. Even just looking up into a regular mirror. All right, let's see. World into a magic world of dreams. They lay the foundation for modern criticism into discursive reviews and essays. From the Romantic group, there poured forth in the early years of the 19th century a stream of creative impulses in the fields of literature and art, which has not ceased to flow to the present day. The folk tales of the latter Middle Ages fertilized drama and novel with new themes. The study of the German past opened the road to a growth of nationalism, which was stimulated by the Napoleonic Wars and soon found in medieval Germanic history and saga the richest mine for all forms of literature. The interest in the demonical powers of nature inspired profound and wild marching like those of E.T.A. Hoffmann. Alexa, Volume 3. And the search for the lost harmony between art and life led to the literature and philosophy of Southern Europe and Persia and India. Folk song and folk tale were enticed forth from their hiding places in the tavern, the spinning room, and the harvest field, and from beside the cottage fireside to cast their spell over the poetic hearts throughout the following century. Deep religious impulses welled up from the German past and in a dozen years transformed the indifferentism of German poets into a glowing faith. Far from the loins of romantic critical theory sprang the impulses to a scientific study of the early literatures and dialects of Europe. The search for unity in a world of atomistic experience finally brought forth the grandiose philosophical system of Hegel, which saw in all human history the record of the march of the absolute through the ages, the unhalting progress of man toward spiritual freedom. A reaction against moonlit mysticism and medievalism in religion and politics, which were outgrowths of romantic theory, began with the disappointments of the Congress of Vienna and was immensely stimulated by the Paris Revolution of 1830. Heine and the warriors of the 30s demanded that poetry interpret life as it is. Yeah, many like to quickly mention the moonlight mysticism and medievalism in religion and politics. Well, there's so much more to it just over the years and throughout the centuries. Moonlight mysticism, people dancing in the moonlight, learning about plants and different things budding in the night. Yeah, like indicas, yeah. Right, and just learning about those things. Right, and then for some people, they didn't want people to know what they were doing. for whatever reason. Right, maybe so they wouldn't steal their supplies. Maybe some thought it was evil. And they're collecting poison berries to poison people with. Could be a whole number of different things. Maybe they're just really dancing in the moonlight. They're doing black magic. Right, so whatever it was. And then, so moonlit mysticism, and why that would be associated to medievalism in religion and politics. Yeah, I mean, just to understand those things, and the trickery with religion and Catholicism, rising from the dead. Learning about anesthesia. Are you healed? Right, and a lot of people really believing they were healed. Right, I mean, if you're in a lot of pain and you're all of a sudden given a strong narcotic, holy crap, that was a miracle. I've never ever felt anything like it. No, that was the touch of the hand of God. Right, so back in those days, I can imagine they went around doing that all year long. And by the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Don't tell them it's just a powder or a plant. They think you're special and they're giving you a lot of money. They're not going to pay for some unknown substance from some stranger. Silly. Right, but if we can put on a performance, and then people that are in enough pain or sick enough will try it, and they're going to say, oh my gosh, I feel a lot better.
Say hello to Wellness Protein.
Alexa, Volume 1. Right, and then, I mean, if you also had access to antimicrobials and things like that, and you're healing sepsis and bacterial infections, I mean, you get a whole host of things. Isn't it interesting, too? And then when you think over the years, just, again, medievalism, moonlight mysticism, religion, politics, witchcraft, the Salem witch trials. Right, I mean, there's so many different stories you can go into. Think of someone getting sick from poison ivy, or getting a rash, or someone else that grew up around it doesn't get a rash from it, really. Can go through it, didn't affect them too much. Yeah, I feel a little itchy, maybe. Not even. I'll just say that if it makes you feel better. Yeah, I feel a little itchy. Wow, that rash looks horrible. I did not trick you. I had no idea that was going to happen. You're not from around here. Okay. Over the years, I'm sure it took time. Like, oh. Right? And something that you've eaten your whole life does a body good. It's going to make someone else really sick. They betrayed us. No, I really didn't know. You must just be a weakling. Alexa, Volume 3. Think about it. You're lactose intolerant? I think the Irish are more known to be lactose intolerant. What causes acid reflux? Is this going into another pH discussion? Are we allowed to talk about those things? But yeah, they like to mention that real quick. Yeah, oh, God is real, for sure. I'm not trying to offend anybody's Jesus or God. You know, there's like 5,000 of them. Which one are you talking about? Documented ones, anyways. There's actually way more if you think about it. And only one. Go figure that. Anyways. Paris Revolution of 1830. Heine and the writers of the 30s demanded that poetry interpret life as it is, and found their inspiration not in the Crusades and misty cathedrals of the 12th century, but in the socialized interpretation of the story of the gospel in Strauss's Life of Jesus, were at the elbows of the pamphleteers of young Germany and prepared the way for the political lyricists whose radical tones ushered in the Revolution of 1848. The unsuccessful attempts to bring about unity and a liberal constitution in Germany put an end to political poetry. Poets and novelists turned from the problems of society to picture human fates on a provincial canvas. The life of the peasant of the Black Forest or the Mecklenburg farmstead. The great representatives of the tragedy in the period of the mid-century, Hebel and Ludwig, and the short story, the Swiss Gottfried Keller, guided these forms into realistic channels where they reflected the problems and conflicts of the modern man in his struggle with society, even though the historical fetish often continued to dictate the themes. In the disillusioned and materialistic decades which followed the Revolution of 1848, the pessimistic philosophy of we're almost done. The pessimistic philosophy of Schopenhauer, with its contempt for all history, came into its own, and first attracted and then repelled the last great heir of Romanticism, Richard Wagner, who achieved to a considerable degree the long-sought syntheses of the arts of his music dramas. The new German Empire, which came into being in 1871, brought at first no new impulses to literary production. These did not come until the end of the 80s, when the growth of industrialism, with the social problems created by the teeming millions, these did not come until the end of the 1880s, when the growth of industrialism, with the social problems created by the teeming millions, which it drew into cities and gave the impulse for the rise of naturalism. Its rule was brief, for naturalism at best accords but poorly with German poetic ideals, but its representative works, like those of Hauptmann, are rich in human sympathy and discover sources of poetry and romance, even in the workhouse hospital and the hut of the track watchman. Here, as in the Impressionism of the first decade of the 20th century, and even in the crudest caricatures which Impressionistic art has recently produced, the German writer still shows himself the same incurable idealist, the same seeker for Weltanschauung that shall be ethically as well as artistically satisfying as he was in the days of Walther von Vogelweide or Sebastian Brandt, especially since the war there runs through all the immensely varied and prolific literature of Germany, an interpretation of life which is both metaphysical and prophetic. Robert Henderson Fife. Yes. Okay, so that concludes the introduction. Yes, thank you for that. I was reading that. So someone was connecting what we were saying earlier with those kind of different traveling lines of people with those powerful medications and herbs. So also having psychedelics. So in today's time, fast forward, pamphleteers, traveling bands of fundraisers, the Catholic Church, a lot of druggies, huh? No kidding. Surprise, surprise. Right. And so when you look at where we see that's where a lot of crime has been happening. Oop, there goes the red cardinal. With some of the catalytic converter trafficking lines. Those drugs are very powerful. And some of the other psychedelics where they have, fuckery going on with a lot of people, teenagers and young adults in their 20s, already fucked up and confused. I mean, think 10, 15 years ago. And these kids have been fucked royally by the public school systems, medications, realizing, all those hopes and dreams just weren't what they thought, probably. Right, because, you're told, as long as you go to school and you do good, you'll be able to, they see all this stuff on a screen, and, when they get out and have to, right, whatever it is, even if you got a college degree, sometimes that's harder than working the middle class type spiel. That's some find that's the better route. Right, take courses online while doing that. Yeah, there's so many different options, huh? Right, but a lot of them are getting fucked with on and offline. We've explained that. This has gone on for decades. It's no secret. A lot of those traveling lines heavily connected to the ones we've been talking about, trafficking a lot of those dangerous drugs, fucking with people, and the retards and the Catholics. I know, right? Yeah, so think about that. Yeah, they're eating babies, doing seances, and going to make you eat maggots, right? I know. So hopefully the public is waking up to that and they understand just the dire need that a lot of us have for educating people, the open conversations, how quickly, like we read that, and just you can touch base really quickly, like the medieval mysticism, politics, moonlight, medievalism. Right. Right, and just to help understand, have the fun teachings and learn about those things. And, they were dancing in the moonlight and learning about plants and plants that grow at night, that bud at night, and some during the day. Let's learn about, that's a whole class, isn't it? You're getting into botany. Right, but we don't get to take it to those lengths. We can be simple, in basic kind of classes. And then some may find interest in certain things and want to look some stuff up on these cool devices they have in their hands. Yeah, teach them to utilize that in a good way, right? I know so many of the state workers and people seem to want to use it to manipulate and isolate our children. It's been really fucking scary to us, quite frankly. So hopefully the proper authorities here in Augusta, Maine, do what they're supposed to do to address the facts here we've been talking about with a lot of those traveling lines and how they target certain people. And you can go back to the 5th century, the 1880s, and take it to right now in 2026. I know sometimes just understanding certain pinnacles, 2001, 1997, 2006, 9, 12. All right, I'd wake up if I were you. So we have 4 children here. My youngest 2 are in the hands of sick, murderous pedophiles. They make child and animal pornography and abuse videos that they feed to a lot of you activists, feeders, chasers, investigators. Yeah, and then look at all the funding they get. So the psychos can talk to the children they're fucking with their minds, and they can tell everyone how well taken care of they are. You motherfuckers around here better wake the fuck up and help our kids by speaking the truth and dropping your immature bullshit. That's all we have to say about that. Much love, health, and peace to the rest of you. Good. Good. Yes, we're going to do, so we did the German mind, and then we're going to do Great American Writers, the introduction. Yeah, my voice needs a rest, holy smokes. Exactly. Yes, you're welcome.